So right now we're going to have a presentation by the mayor on redevelopment.
I'm wondering if any of those people want to give them time to leave.
Oh, as a fair warning, if any of you would like to vacate, now would be a good time. Any of the proclamations we gave, if you don't want to sit through about a 40-minute presentation on redevelopment, feel free to run.
There we go.
Fill us in, okay?
It's all yours.
Thank you, Council Vice President and members of the Council and my fellow residents. I'm here tonight to talk about the beginning of what I hope will be another redevelopment process here in the Township of East Brunswick. For the past 6 months, I've been working with Greg Pekulski, the Director of Planning and Engineering, members of his staff, Jeff Lair, who's the Township Redevelopment Attorney, and other professionals to seek solutions that will improve our business corridor. During my administration, we have streamlined the processes for businesses to open up here in East Brunswick. Besides cutting the red tape, I've individually met with most of the property owners who operate malls of all sizes here in town. Vacancies in East Brunswick are actually down since when I took office as mayor, but obviously much more needs to be done. But we must remember, these properties are privately owned. As government, we cannot force the landlord to rent a space, repair his building. I've learned through this process that those owners who work their properties, attracting new tenants, maintaining their properties, investing in their properties, are those whose properties are 100% occupied. Those mall owners who choose not to are the ones with the empty stores that we see. It's no secret. Successful malls are the result of owners who are working hard to ensure their own successes. In addition, the way that we shop has changed. Although I'm no expert, I believe, as most of us do, the retail world is evolving. Physical stores, the ones that are commonly referred to as brick and mortar stores, are under attack by the virtual stores of the internet. Some experts will say that between 7 to 12% of all goods are now sold over the internet. These numbers will only increase in the future. Ask yourself, how much have you purchased on the web? A further example, it was recently announced by Netflix that they've just signed a deal with the comedian Adam Sandler for his next 4 movies. Those movies will never see a movie theater. They will be streamed online, and as the beginning of the talk in that industry is that even movies are going to be changing. People can say over and over again that we need to fill the stores, as if to say it will make it happen. America's economy is about capitalism. Businesses move into areas where their studies indicate that they can make a profit. Perhaps the new reality is that we just have too much retail space here in East Brunswick, particularly in this economy that we have and the internet as I just described. But I'll leave that up to the experts to discuss. Today, my goal is to start the process of redevelopment with a presentation by Jeff Otto of Otto Valuation Group. Jeff has lived in East Brunswick, and his company is based right here in town. He knows East Brunswick, the retail market, and the state of New Jersey extremely well. I ask that you listen carefully to what Jeff has to say tonight. He's going to outline the problems and that we face not only here in East Brunswick, but overall in the economy. Solutions will come later during this redevelopment process. I'm not asking the council to take any action tonight. The redevelopment process is a lengthy one that involves my administration, the council, the planning board, the public, and the business community. Everyone will have an opportunity to be part of the process. I look forward to working with the council as we move through the redevelopment process. And I'd also like to bring attention to one other item dealing with our business corridor. Just as we've been working on redevelopment, we've also been working with respect to our master plan. The master plan was redone approximately 5 to 6 years ago, and state law says it must be done every 10 years. Nonetheless, part and parcel with redevelopment, I've asked Greg Pekulski and his staff again to re-examine our master plan. That work is almost complete. They'll make their presentations to this council and the planning board when those studies are done and the recommendations are to be made. Again, I thank you for your time. I'm going to ask now that Jeff Otto come up to the podium and start his presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'll apologize in advance. I'm recuperating from a head cold last week, and my voice will crack at times. Sorry for that.
If you need more water, let us know. We have plenty.
Okay, thank you. First, just in terms of general introduction, as to my background, I was a resident here of East Brunswick for 22 years, and I had the pleasure of raising my children and having my children go through the entire school system here, and they are very fond memories. And my office, my company here is located here in East Brunswick, and we've been here for the past 40 years. So this is a place that I know well. My business focuses on consulting and valuation services in the world of real estate. And I provide those services to a wide range of clients, many of them municipal, county, and state government, and federal government. I also work with the lending community, banks and mortgage lenders, and the development community as well. And my work focuses on understanding the dynamics of local economies and real estate markets, and anticipating what happens next. I've authored several texts on this subject, and I've been qualified as an expert in the topic that I'll speak to you here about tonight at all levels of the court system, state and federal included. I've been asked to analyze conditions, present and future, for retail space here in East Brunswick, and specifically for a limited study area in East Brunswick that generally runs along Route 18 from Eggers Street to the north and West Ferris to the south. Before I share with you my findings, I want to cover some preliminaries. First, it's important to recognize that the challenges that we face today, these changed circumstances, are deeply rooted in long-term structural shifts that have been playing out for decades. They have little to do with the recent economic recession, which ended now more than 5 years ago. It's been more than 5 years since the recession ended and the economy has been growing, and yet here we find ourselves more than 5 years downstream, and there are extraordinary challenges affecting retail space here in East Brunswick. And so the recession is not the cause of what we're experiencing now, so long after. And what that tells us is that current circumstances are not a short-term circumstance that will fade with time, but are rather more long-term and permanent. For a long time, New Jersey was fortunate to have a very high-profile economic performance, which ranked it among the top economic forces not only in the nation but around the world. But that has changed. And we now have new variables which have been injected into the economic equation here in New Jersey, which we're seeing the results of play out in real estate markets. As an example, at the national level, the U.S. economy has now recovered all of the 8.7 million jobs that were lost during the economic recession, and gone on to add an additional 1.1 million over and above what was lost during the recession. So at the national level, our United States has accomplished 113% job recovery. We've recovered more than 100% of the jobs that were lost. The same is true in New York City, which has higher unemployment, has higher job levels, employment levels today than existed before the recession began. But that is not the case in New Jersey. Here in New Jersey, we've only recovered 39%, less than half, of the jobs that were lost during the recession, while at the national level, we've seen full recovery. And so New Jersey is underperforming the rest of the country, and in a moment, we'll see how that trickles down here into the local East Brunswick area. Since the recession has ended, New Jersey has had the third worst job recovery in the nation, and that trend continues today. I should point out that this is not a short-term condition here in New Jersey. New Jersey's job market, its economy has been underperforming for more than a decade, going all the way back to year 2000, which in turn explains why unemployment is higher here than in other places. There have also been significant effects on household income. The amount of earning dollars coming into households for them to, in turn, be able to spend shopping in retail stores. For example, over the course of the recession, nationally, household income increased by 6%, while declining by 2% here in New Jersey. Focusing more recently on the last year only, national household income over the last year has risen by 2%, while in New Jersey it's declined by 7%. This clearly places strains on the ability of households to be able to afford the same level of retail spending that they were once able to, and in turn, that passes through into significant challenges for retail real estate. Taking a look at the effects of all this on real estate demand here in New Jersey, one of the more obvious places to see how New Jersey has been disproportionately affected in recent years is to look at what's happened with house prices. Nationally, house prices are down today by 9% from the peak level that they achieved back in 2006, while in New Jersey today, they remain down by 19% from the peak. So the recovery in house prices has been half as much here as it has been around the rest of the country. And with regard to mortgage delinquency and the pass-through effects into foreclosures, New Jersey now has the highest rate of delinquent mortgages in the nation, with 1 out of every 10 homeowners having missed 3 or more mortgage payments, highest in the country. The national rate on that is averaging 2%. In New Jersey, we are averaging 10% of all mortgages being in a delinquent state. We've also seen this effect play out in the commercial real estate market. And while there are many indicators for this, one of the brightest or the clearest examples is to take a look at what's happening with high vacancy and depressed rental prices in many suburban markets. And with regard to the value of commercial property in New Jersey, at the national level, commercial real estate values have fully recovered to their pre-recession levels, while in New Jersey they remain 12% below the peak. And of course, we're reminded frequently about the fiscal challenges that we face here in our state, in terms of tax revenues having been constrained not only during the recession but after, and the challenges that creates for our state in terms of being able to meet its financial obligations, like investing in road and bridge infrastructure construction, and also meeting its pension obligations for public employees. All of this passes through into the conditions that we find today in commercial real estate, and specifically in the retail market. Some of these changes have their origins far outside of East Brunswick borders, and in fact outside of the United States borders. A reordering of the economic conditions around the world, which have essentially resulted in a more globalized economy, where businesses in the U.S. in New Jersey and in East Brunswick are competing with other businesses from all around the world who have the competitive advantage of having lower costs of operation, lower labor costs, lower tax rates, lower real estate costs, which puts businesses in a place like New Jersey at a distinct competitive advantage. Other parts of this are self-induced as a result of the very high cost and high regulatory environment that we have in our state, which makes it more difficult for businesses to prosper here. And as an example of that, a recent survey of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies ranked New Jersey in 2014 as the 4th worst place in the country to create jobs. We've also had significant demographic changes which have taken place here in the fabric, in the makeup of the people who live in New Jersey and here in East Brunswick. The big story here is that we find ourselves shifting to a European model for demographics, for our economy, and for real estate demand, and that's evidenced in a wide variety of indicators. For one, shrinking household size. Households are getting much smaller in size, with locally here in this immediate area, and also statewide, 60% of all households being either one person or two persons in size, and with 2/3 of all households having no children 18 years of age or younger. Even in a place as family-oriented as East Brunswick, today, 61% of all households in East Brunswick have no children 18 years of age or younger. This has significant implications for the spending in retail stores. And all of these trends are creating enormous challenges for New Jersey's suburban and rural communities as they are increasingly unable to support the quantity of commercial space, and specifically retail space, that exists in their borders. Another very concerning trend that we're seeing play out here, specifically in East Brunswick, is what's called the millennial shift. Today, households and individuals between the ages of 25 and 34 are a key group for retailers and employers. They are the prized possession of people who are looking to hire talent, and they are the target audience for retailers. 25 to 34-year-olds, which is commonly referred to as the millennial generation, now outspend baby boomers in retail shopping. But the population of this age group is collapsing here in East Brunswick. Consider this. From 2000 to 2010, population here in East Brunswick grew by 2%. The number of people living here over that 10-year cycle increased by 2%. But here in East Brunswick at the same time, the population of 25 to 34-year-olds declined by 19%, and the population of 35 to 44-year-olds declined by 21%. In other words, the demographic is hollowing out, and in the process, there are fewer shoppers living in the town to spend the dollars necessary to support the quantity of retail space that exists here in East Brunswick. And I can tell you that the same is not happening in New Jersey, nor is it happening in Middlesex County. It's specifically happening here in East Brunswick because of the landscape of zoning laws and uses and housing choices and the lack of a rail station. It's because of all of those factors that the most important demographic to retailers and employers is leaving in such large numbers. Also, corresponding to this shift, as will probably come as no surprise to you, is that we're also seeing a significant decline in East Brunswick in the population of individuals 10 years of age and younger. sharp declines happening in there, and that is largely because of the collapse in birth rates that we've seen, not only leading up to the recession, but during the recession and following the recession, because in most cases, young households, young people starting out in life, can't afford both home ownership and the cost of raising children, and so are increasingly being childless. Now, these numbers are even more concerning when we consider the quantity of retail space that exists here in East Brunswick. I'm going to give you some statistics so you can understand the magnitude of the problem that you are facing. In New Jersey, on average, there exists 49,000 square feet of retail space in each square mile of land area. Statewide, 49,000 square feet of retail space per square mile. East Brunswick has 160,000 square feet of retail space, more than triple what exists in other places. And the domino effect of declining occupancy and rising vacancy in East Brunswick retail space translates into reduced property values for those commercial properties, which lowers their value and reduces the taxes that they pay, and in the process transfers the tax burden increasingly to the residential tax base. I'm next going to talk about the demand levels for retail space that are occurring in New Jersey and also specifically to the East Brunswick and Route 18 area as well. Before I get into the numbers, I just want to set the stage with some big trends that are driving this, which are originating beyond East Brunswick's borders. For one, consumers are spending less and saving more as an after effect, as a reaction to the economic recession. We also see that shopping today tends to be more value-oriented, meaning that shoppers are looking to find the most competitive pricing that they can find, which typically plays out with consumers shopping in larger big box retail stores. And because it is ultimately a zero-sum game, that has some diminishing effects on the amount of retail spending that occurs in other types of retail places. We also are facing the aging of the baby boom generation, those born starting in 1946 who are now turning age 65 here in New Jersey at a rate of more than $100,000 a year, who are starting to save more for their retirements and spend less, which is reducing that spending in retail stores. And then finally, the collapse here in East Brunswick of the millennial generation and the one after it, Generation X, the 35 to 44-year-olds, is causing a significant contraction in spending that would be more family-oriented types of spending. Spending on children's clothing and children's furniture, toys, sporting goods, and bicycles, all getting lesser and lesser because of this hollowing out of the demographic. And finally, we need to recognize that there was significant overbuilding of retail space that occurred going back in past decades. Back in the 1980s would be a good example of that, because it was a field of dreams scenario. The economic picture was so rosy, and households were seeing their income rise so rapidly that we were all able to spend increasing amounts of money, which brought more commercial space to be constructed, particularly here in East Brunswick. And the last big shift here that we'll talk about, and the mayor referenced this just a little earlier, we're seeing this rapid movement toward online retail spending. This, too, is a net loss for the brick and mortar stores that the mayor mentioned. When we shop online, and it's certainly convenient to do that, it is essentially a process whereby we are purchasing direct from a warehouse and completely cutting the retail store operator out of the equation, which means that they lose the sales volume and as a result become less able to afford to pay the rent, which in turn spirals into rising vacancy. Now, online spending is just getting started. Today, it only accounts for about 10% of total retail sales. It's expected to rise to more than 50% over the next decade, which means that the pressure on existing retail space and the vacancy rates that it's experiencing is going to remain very high for a very long time. The takeaway from all of this is that retail space in East Brunswick is significantly oversupplied. Now, this was not always the case. There was a time 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when households spent more. That was also a time when other towns didn't have an abundance of retail space within their borders. And residents from other places in Middlesex County and from parts of Monmouth County would need to drive to East Brunswick to be able to find places to satisfy their shopping needs. That's no longer the case because all of those other places have built their own retail space in the last 10 years and more. And so there's less reason for other households and other places to come here and to support the oversupply, the overbuilt extent of retail space here in this town. Another factor in the shopping equation is that we all, as consumers, prefer to spend as little time as possible taking care of our retail spending needs, hence the increase in online shopping. And so people in other towns are less likely to come here also because they don't want to invest the time to drive here and go from one store to the other and perhaps experience traffic on the roadways. The effects of this in retail space are evident here in East Brunswick. I'm going to run you through some performance statistics here in East Brunswick, and I'm going to contrast that to what's going on in New Jersey, in Middlesex County, and then we'll compare that to East Brunswick. And I'm also going to include in my comments to you a comparison as to what is specifically occurring in that loosely defined study area that I explained to you earlier, which is the Route 18 corridor from Egger Street to West Ferris. Starting with vacancy, which is a key measurement of performance levels for commercial real estate, the vacancy level for retail space in New Jersey is 6%. On average, retail shopping centers are 94% occupied, which means that 6% of the space is dark and not paying rent to the landlord, to the property owner, and not paying their share of operating expenses, what's called common area maintenance or CAM charges, for the operation of that property. Statewide, we have 6% vacancy. Middlesex County has 6% vacancy. East Brunswick has 12% vacancy, and that loosely defined study area on Route 18 is at 18%, triple what exists in East Brunswick, in Middlesex County and in the state. 6% state, 6% county, 12% East Brunswick, which would incorporate all of East Brunswick, including the lower part of Route 18, and 18% in that study area. A more important statistic than vacancy is what we refer to as availability. Availability includes not only space which is dark and vacant, but other space in which there is currently a tenant paying rent, but that tenant has given notice of their intent to vacate. This typically comes in the form of advising the landlord that a store operator will not be renewing their lease at expiration, and that the landlord, the owner of that space, will begin to market it in advance of the tenant actually moving out and vacating. When we shift from vacancy to availability, which is a larger pool, in New Jersey, the availability rate rises from 6 to 9%, from vacancy at 6 to availability at 9. In Middlesex County, it rises from 6% to 8.5% for availability. In East Brunswick, it is at 13%, And in the study area, it is at 19%. These are formidable statistics. I can tell you that vacancy levels in double digits is certain death for retail real estate. It's death by 1,000 cuts. No retail operator can operate profitably with double-digit vacancies. And that is systemically occurring throughout East Brunswick. The most important calculation, measurement of retail performance in a market area is what we call absorption. Absorption is the rate, the pace at which the vacancy and availability in space is being filled. So think of it as a bathtub that's half drained, and now the faucet gets turned on as water starts to fill back up to a normalized level. When we take a look at the rate at which retailers are moving into space, here's what we find as to the calculated time it will take to fill the availability I just shared with you across the state, county, town, and the study area. At the rate at which retailers are signing leases and moving into retail space in New Jersey, it will take 26 years to fill the 39 million square feet of space that's currently on the market. Now that's sort of a staggering number. It's hard to absorb. Here's sort of the mathematics that go into that. There's 39 million square feet of space that is available on the market for retail buildings in New Jersey, and that space is filling at a rate of 125,000 square feet per month, which is 1.5 million per year. And when you divide 1.5 million square feet as a fill rate per year into 39 million square feet of space, tells you that at the rate that we're at, it's going to take 26 years to fill that availability. I won't take you through all of that explanation for the other markets. I'm just going to tell you how many years it will take to fill the space in other places. 26 years for retail space in New Jersey. 8.5 years for Middlesex County. So Middlesex County is doing significantly better than the state. 36 years in East Brunswick. 121 years for the study area. In other words, there is absolutely no hope that this problem will get better without some form of intervention, without some action. Looking ahead, there are additional challenges which will come to affect retail demand. For starters, as I mentioned earlier, the continuing popularity of online shopping will continue to chip away more and more at the sales that physical stores are able to accomplish. In addition to that, there is a significant pipeline of newly constructed retail space which is coming to Middlesex County, some of it very close to here. In other words, the pie of retail spending is about to get sliced into smaller and smaller pieces. The biggest example of this is what's planned for Luxury Point at Sayreville on the old National Lead site. You see it when you go over the parkway and you go over the bridge and you look down below. It used to be an environmental toxic cleanup site. Construction has now begun on constructing this multi-use project, which will include 3 million square feet of retail and entertainment space. And they have branded it as the mall for millennials. In other words, they're looking to attract exactly the demographic that East Brunswick can't seem to hold on to. They understand the synergistic benefits of multi-use development, because there'll also be more than 1,400 apartments on that site. And there'll also be 600 townhouses on that site. Also, not very far to the west, there's a very prominent project, which is branded as Main Street at North Brunswick. It's on the former Johnson & Johnson research and production facility on Route 1, just south of Cousins Lane. And that project will see more than 1,000 housing units built on it and more than 500,000 square feet of retail space. I mention these because these new retail venues will be competing for the shoppers that are currently spending their retail dollars in East Brunswick stores. And so there is a compelling urgency to this situation. Looking ahead for solutions in terms of how this can be addressed, first you need to understand that these trends are not short-term in nature. They take a very long time to develop, decades, and even longer to change course for. And so there are no quick or easy fixes to this. Instead, it requires a long-term commitment to change. The real story here is that everything in our society today is increasingly interactive, collaborative, ways of working together and relating to other people, other businesses, our surroundings, our community. And so we should recognize that the big storyline in our lives is that we are more connected than ever before. Social media would be an example of that. And this translates into real estate development with placemaking by promoting multi-use development where both residential and commercial uses can coexist in close proximity to each other and feed into each other within a community. One of the basic truths, realities for demand for retail space is that retail spending follows housetops, follows rooftops. And so, correcting the weak retail spending in East Brunswick will require, in some way, reshaping the landscape here to create more consumer spending, and the way to do that will be to mix retail and housing together inside of a redevelopment area. This also works in other ways, because we've found around the state that when these synergistic redevelopments occur, mixing retail and lifestyle in the same place, that it becomes a lure, an attraction to employers. Because now a place has been created where the 25 to 34-year-olds that large companies are all chasing are living, because today employers move to where the talent pool lives. It's a different world. In my generation, if I worked for a big corporation and they asked me to move to Plano, Texas, I probably would have said yes before I even opened a map to figure where Plano, Texas was located. No longer the case. Retail spending, retailers, and employers all are moving to where the populations exist, and by creating these multi-use developments, you'll not only be attracting retail spending, but supporting the existing stock of retail space and office space in East Brunswick. I'm not going to take time here today to talk to you about what's happening in the retail in the office building market here in East Brunswick, but I just will share you a corollary analysis. Getting back to the years that it will take to fill the bathtub, for office space in East Brunswick, the fill rate will take approximately 94 years to fill the vacancy and availability in office space today. And so that too should be an area of concern, and creating redevelopment areas which result in these synergies will help to address that problem as well. In closing, I want to tell you that solving these challenges are not easy. They do require a significant change. Many suburban municipalities, and I'm not directing this at East Brunswick, but in general, many suburban municipalities over recent decades have worked very hard to make their zoning and their land use more restrictive in order to control growth. And that will need to change if this problem is to be addressed. It will require a partnership, a collaborative effort, not only within the community, not only within the council and your political bodies, but also between government and the private sector to solve. And I will tell you that there is some urgency to this. This is not a problem that should be ignored. And the reason is that, first, the continuing decline in commercial property values, and particularly in retail space, is going to, now that home values are beginning to rise again, will result in a shift of the tax burden increasingly from your commercial base to your residential property taxpayers. The other reason that there is urgency here is that this is a zero-sum game. The advantages that will result from redevelopment and planning for these mixed-use types of lifestyle areas, the benefits of that will only occur for the early adopters, the municipalities that get ahead of this curve and do it earlier rather than later. If we wait out 5 years or 10 years and other places have taken a more proactive planning approach, it'll then be too late because the market will already have been saturated. And so I know that's a bit gloomy and concerning, but it's real. And I'm available for any questions that you may have of me about any of this.
Gentlemen, questions?
I have one. So, from what I understand in our evaluations the last 2 or 3 years in East Brunswick, our vacancy rate has gone down here kind of in spite of the glut of retail that we have. So we're really, or at least in the past few years, overperforming really where we should be in terms of filling spaces that really we have too many of to begin with, it sounds like.
Yes, you're correct. The vacancy rate has declined over the last several years, and that doesn't occur easily. And it is a positive trend, but there's only so far you can move that dial, move that needle. The larger problem here, as noteworthy and commendable as it is that vacancy has declined, this larger problem will require a more comprehensive solution.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, Mr. Otto.
Okay, thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Overwhelmingly informative.
That was,
Come on, information overload.
and that was the purpose for tonight. As I said when I started this presentation tonight, this was just to lay the groundwork for a long process dealing with redevelopment. If there's one thing I've learned working with this council over the years, that you've never shied away from tackling issues. No matter whether it was restructuring our water and sewer utilities into one from the sewage authority, whether it's tackling our budget, we have not shied away as a governing body from the difficult situations that are facing our town. As you heard Mr. Otto said, we need to be ahead of the curve. And I think by starting this process, which has been ongoing, like I said, behind the scenes from the administration and the planning gone into it, we've been working on this for at least 6 months. I thought it was important to get out that information, that we will continue as a governing body and the mayor's office to continue to work hard. Despite, as Councilman Hughes says, we've made improvements on 18. The vacancy rate has dropped, but the problem is systemic. and that's what we need to address. I thought it was important also, just to, not to belabor and lengthen the meeting, just have Jeff Lair, the redevelopment attorney, come up and just give a brief overview as to what the redevelopment process will entail. Jeff?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Otto. Thank you, members of the council. I've enjoyed a good working relationship with you over the years, and I hope to continue to do that. Yes, the problems are formidable problems, and they are sobering trends, but they can, with your assistance and your cooperation, we can overcome a lot of these challenges. It will be long-term. I just wanted to remind you a little bit about the process. Some of you have already been involved in it, but I'll just walk you through the steps. We will be back to you at some point in the not-too-distant future to provide you with a roadmap for the future in this general area that we've defined, this study area. But essentially, it starts with the council adopting a resolution authorizing the planning board to undertake what's called a preliminary investigation to determine whether the proposed study area is indeed a redevelopment area under one or more of the criteria under the local redevelopment and housing law. The planning board then takes it under its wing, and after a resolution is adopted by the governing body starting the process, the planning board then conducts what's called a preliminary investigation. It's a hearing upon notice. The planning board proposes an actual map which identifies with more particularity the area, the boundaries of the proposed redevelopment area, and the location of the various parcels within that redevelopment area. After the hearing by the planning board, there is either a recommendation or not a recommendation to the council that the area meets one or more of the criteria under the local redevelopment and housing law. And then if there is a recommendation for identifying it as an area in need of redevelopment, that resolution is adopted by the planning board and sent back to the council. The governing body then may, and I use the word may under the statute, then adopt a resolution determining that the delineated area is in fact an area in need of redevelopment. And then the process moves to a redevelopment plan. The governing body can take it under its own wing and prepare a redevelopment plan through its own professionals, or refer the issue to the planning board for it to prepare a redevelopment plan. The redevelopment plan is then adopted by ordinance of the governing body. It then becomes your super zoning ordinance. It is an overlay to what your existing ordinance is, but it becomes your super zoning ordinance for that redevelopment study area. It's a long process. Some of you have been through it, and I can answer any of your questions as the process continues, but I really look forward to being able to come back to you at some point, not too far in the future, to present this particular study area, and we can begin the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.